Welcome back to Season 5 of the True Blue Conversations podcast with your host, Adam Blum. Podcasters, Adam's book, Easy Target, Taming the Black Dog, is now available for pre-order. Head on over to Booktopia, Dimmicks and Big Sky Publishing to pre-order your copy and be one of the first to read Adam's story of surviving to thriving and how he escaped the cycle of being an easy target. Easy Target, Taming the Black Dog by Adam Blum. Coming soon. G'day podcasters. Before we get underway with True Blue Conversations, just wanted to give a huge shout out to our friend and sponsor, the Warrior U podcast, hosted by Bram Connolly. Bram is a former Special Forces commander, best-selling author, popular podcast host, and human optimization pioneer. He has an authentic style and the unique ability to not only motivate, but also take people on a journey of self-discovery. Through the Warrior U podcast, Bram interviews guests in a bid to explore all things human optimization, resilience, leadership, and coffee. His book, The Commando Way, a Special Forces Commander's Lessons for Life, Leadership and Success, is available now on amazon.com.au. So from Adam Blum and all of us here at True Blue Conversations, a big shout out to the Warrior U podcast, Bram Connolly, and his new book, The Commando Way, out now. We'd like to thank Tactical Recovery for sponsoring this show. Head on over to tacticalrecovery.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for one hell of a discount. Tactical Recovery, magnesium-based muscle care, salty products for sore fuckers. Welcome, loyal listeners of True Blue Conversations. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Australian Warfighter Coffee. Veteran owned and run, driven by a simple yet powerful motto: people over profit. Every dollar goes towards supporting veterans and first responder charity groups. Head on over to AustralianWarfighters.com and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Because let's face it, any other coffee is just brown sadness water. Now, let's get on with the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue Conversations. I'm Adam Blum. Today, I'm joined by former Warrant Officer Mark Henneberry. And Mark served in the Royal Australian Artillery Corps and he deployed to Cambodia. And he has joined us today to talk about his career in the ADF and his life after service. Hi, Mark. Thanks for joining us on the show, mate. It's an absolute honour and a privilege to record your story.
Well, thanks, Adam. I really appreciate that intro. Thanks very much.
Nah, mate, it's great to have you on. So, Mark, before we get started on joining the military, and let's go back to a young Mark and what life was like growing up and what were you like at school, what were your hobbies, and do you have any brothers and sisters?
Wow. Mate, I was a bit of a terror. So I grew up in a town called Cootamundra. So just mum and dad. Mum grew up in Millers Point in Sydney. Mm-hmm. Dad was a Maroubra boy. Parents came from a bit of a difficult background themselves, right? And so Dad joined the police force back in '68, I believe. He met Mum up in the cross. Mum was a hairdresser. I'll say that again. And, you know, he was, they met and, you know, in '71 I was born in Sydney. Dad was then posted to Cootamundra, that is, as a country copper. And we grew up down there till I was about 13, and then we moved to a place called Goulburn, where Dad again was posted in as into Goulburn, and
would have been a smaller town back then to what it is now.
Yeah, it was pretty small at the time. From memory, I think Goulburn was about 20,000 people.
Yeah, okay.
Coota was only around 5. So you got that, still a small sort of town, but we bought a farm out west at a sort of near a place called Bredalbin. That's just an area, and we had a farm out there, and we run horses, adjustment for race horses and all that sort of thing. So that was, we lived out, well, Mum and Dad lived out there till the late 90s, but I sort of stayed until around 87, 88 when I joined the Army.
And for you, school, you're pretty good at school, or?
Mate, I was, I had a lot of trouble at school. I spent a lot of time in detention, or... Look, school was an interesting... I probably would have, in today's terms, suffered from ADHD.
Yep.
It was interesting that... It's an interesting point you brought up, because I remember being at one parent-teacher night when one of the brothers said to Mum that he thought I was an enigma.
Yeah, right.
Right, I sort of looked at him and he looked at me, and Mum looked at him, and, what does an enigma mean? And what it boiled down to was, there were some, I suppose, subjects that I really excelled in, and others that I just couldn't care less.
Yep.
Right, I didn't pay attention. I just said, I'm just here, I'm just making up the numbers.
Yep.
To a point where I was sent to a vocational officer that sits down and you run through a whole heap of tests to try and find out the way you think, right?
Yep.
And basically he came out and said, look, you're testing very highly in these different sort of subjects. He goes, well, what do you want to do in life? I don't know. I had no idea. And at that point, I started getting in trouble with the cops. You're sort of starting to run with a group of people that may not have had your best interests at heart. But at the same time, I was about year 9, I guess, I started to get involved with... Because we came from a farm, there was a guy called Ted Smith who lived down the road. He was an old World War II veteran, but he was a shearing contractor. And I sort of started to get involved with shearing because I liked it. It was good. It was, you work goddamn hard from 7 till 5 each day, but you got paid an adult's wage, right? Yep. His idea was if you do a man's job, you get paid a man's wage. That was his feedback. And, you got involved with, and they were pretty rough and ready sort of characters, you can imagine, shearers. Yep. But I'd do that on my school holidays. I'd go away and they might run a shed for nearly 6 weeks. And so I'd be out there for 6 weeks, come home of a weekend and back out sort of thing. And, but that was, and you get caught doing a few different things that you shouldn't. And, I remember sitting in an office being told that if, we don't get this boy into something, the next time his name comes past my desk, we're going to put him in the big house because he's getting to the age.
Yeah, right.
And that sort of put the wind up me because Dad was a cop, right?
Yeah.
And that was pretty hard for him to take, knowing that his son was a bit of running with a bunch of louts, so to speak.
Yep.
And oddly enough, at the same time, there was an army recruitment van in town, and I basically got frog marched down. And I remember this. I don't know who he was. He was a grunt sergeant, and all smiles. It was fantastic. And I was like, oh, geez, this will be good. Oh, mate, we'll look after you. Come along. How old is it? 16. Oh, another 12 months. That sort of that sales pitch, the recruitment sales pitch.
I heard they were good at that.
Good. Oh, very good, mate. Yeah. Very good. And made you think, you're going to be a part of this. And so I went away, thought long and hard about it, and then remembering the conversations that we had with a certain magistrate. It would have been 12 months later, 1st of June 1988, I marched into Kapooka.
So I just want to go back for a minute and talk. So I understand you bought a little farm as a teenager, and was that you had shearing in that was what you wanted to do? Or?
Oh, look, when Dad bought the place, we sort of moved out. We built a house, all the box and dice. We were running horses on the farm. Dad was a little bit into the horse racing industry, and so we knew a lot of people up in Sydney who were training, and so what we'd do is they'd put their horses down with us to give them a break from city life.
Yep.
And it was hard. Horses are hard work, man. When you see these guys at the Melbourne Cup and they sit there and they're cheering on, oh, fantastic, and they're wearing their garb and everything else, you pull back the curtains and there's a lot of hard work that goes into these things. And you might find yourself working with a multi-million-dollar horse that's an absolute donkey, and then you're working with a horse that was purchased at an auction for $50, and the thing could, is almost like the Carl Lewis of horses.
Yeah.
It's one of those. Or Usain Bolt, if you want to call them that, you're like, how did that happen? It's got nothing. I don't think it's got anything to do with genetics. I think it's just the actual horse itself, sort of thing. So,
Right.
Interesting times as a kid.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your dad was a police officer. Did you ever have the inkling to join the police, or
Not at all.
not at all?
I had a very love-hate relationship with police. Dad and I didn't really see eye to eye on a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I was not a chip off the old block, right? So, as much as I respected what he did and his background, I mean, Dad had a really tough upbringing. Dad was in a boys' home with his brothers at a very young age at Engadine in Sydney. His parents couldn't control them, and so... my grandfather wasn't exactly a good guy either. He was a bit of a troublemaker in Sydney.
A larrikin back in the day?
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
Right, so the apple doesn't fall too far away from the tree, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
And,
yep.
I never really knew him that well. I only met my grandfather, my dad's father, about half a dozen times in my life.
Yep.
And I think that was on purpose. Whereas on my mum's side, it was a bit different. They went to, World War II and, World War I and things like that. But both sides of the family were convicts, right? Yep. So the Irish side was sent out on Cockatoo Island there in Sydney Harbour. They were chipping away. The names are on the list there somewhere. And on my mother's side, they came through Port Arthur.
Yeah, right, okay.
Right.
Yep.
So, I'm not, I don't come from aristocracy, if that makes sense.
So, for you, mate, the army, so frog hop down to the recruit, and because in '88 there was no internet, there was no 1901, it was down to the recruitment.
Straight in.
Yep.
Look, I tell you what, in reflection to the way I see it done now and to the way it was done then, it just happened like clockwork. I was given my date. I was given my joining instruction.
Yep.
I was given a fitness plan, and I just got to it. Luckily, my uncle, who's passed away, Bill, he went through in... When did Bill go? Bill went through in 1967, and he basically said, this is what you need to expect. Gave me a heads up before I went.
No political correctness in those days, mate.
Look, you know what? A lot of there's a bit of misinfo about that stuff. Look, it was tough. There is no getting around it. It was we started with a platoon of about 60. I reckon it was about 63 from memory. Because we had bunks, right? And guys were doubling up in rooms. Like, there were 4 guys to... Oh, it was 6 guys, 8 guys to a room at some point. That quickly fell away. Week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. They just slowly just got rid of these guys. And we marched out with 22.
Yeah, right.
And so it was it was tough. I didn't find it easy. The first 4 weeks, it was like a culture shock like you've never had before in your life. It was like a square punch in the face.
Because you were 17 at that point? Yep.
17. Brand new 17-year-old, and so I was probably one of the youngest guys in the platoon at the time. And Steve Beaumont, Steve was my section commander. Steve's actually used to be a EOD up here at the Queensland Police.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, caught up with Steve a couple of times.
So... And for you, it was 12 weeks back then?
Yeah, 12 weeks. It got a little extended in the middle there because we had the flu hit the place.
Yeah, okay.
And they shut Kapooka down, and that was interesting. So the secos got quite... they become a little dynamic in the way we trained because we couldn't actually go outside. And so we started doing things inside and, a lot of weapon handling and all that sort of good stuff. But they did a really good job, the guys. I mean, it was... you're talking about limited resources you know, and a maximum amount of time, and trying to fill that time in with things to try and keep us occupied. I think they did a magnificent job. But anyway, that's just in reflection of that. But it was 17, 12 weeks.
And for you, did you want to go infantry, or did you want to do something different?
Everyone who walks through the front gate at Kapooka expects to go to infantry. I was no different.
Yeah, right.
Yep. I walked in, I went, great. Yep, going to be a grunt. Like everyone else.
Yep.
But somewhere along the line, that changes. It changes because either they tell you it's going to change,
Yes.
or you get given an option. Like we used to do a 3-2-1. What would you like to become? And Steve was engineers, and I was like, wow, I'd love to be a engineer. You know, go as a combat engineer. But it depends on what places are available at the time. And so some of grunts have always got positions, right? Whereas some of the other corps, it sort of gets a little bit harder. You know, we even had guys that direct entry into, they went to grunts first and then went to MPs.
Yeah, right.
Because that was where they wanted to go. Who wanted to go to MP? Anyway, be a door opener for your life, whatever. But then, you know, I know some good guys who are MPs, so good lads. But look, it just depended on what was available at the time. And look, I got the option of going to artillery, and you know, after knowing, I think it was a Company 2IC was a gunner, and you know, he was a pretty stand-up sort of bloke. I said, right, I'm going to go to grunts, and off I went.
So you go to artillery, and where was your initial employment training? So
this is interesting. So we got on the bus at Kapooka, you know, waved to goodbye as you're going out through the front gates, and there's 3 places we go to. First was SME in Moorebank, where we dropped off all the engineers. See you later, fellas. And then we travelled on to North Head in Manly. Right. Righto, North Head and Manly. That was where my IET was.
Right.
It's like jackpot, you know. And then you knew the grunts were going to travel into Singleton, right?
Yeah, right.
And so all the boys would drop up, and you'd pull up at Manly, and everyone would get off for lunch, right? So we'd all go into the mess, and then we sort of separated, you know. And I said, "See you later, the boys." It was really, you know, it's a real interesting point to make, because once you see those guys go on, you're laughing at them, but you're like, you know, we're splitting up.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Did you ever see some of them again?
Oh, and in some of the most ridiculous places, I'd bump into one of these guys. You know, you'd be either in Brisbane, or you'd be, you know, down on an exercise somewhere.
Yep.
And out of nowhere, you're getting in a headlock with someone. Someone's got you in a headlock, and you're like, you start fighting. And it's like, oh, mate, what are you doing? It was really good to see some of those boys.
So how long was your initial employment training for?
So it depended on what courses were coming up. So basically you had to stand by and wait.
Yep.
Right. And I had to hang around for a little while, and I did a 361, which is a signaller's course initially. That was my first job in Arty, was a signaller. And that went for about, how long was the SIG course? I think it was about 8 weeks, 2 months, something like that. And then you go, you know, you get posted off to your respective post locality. But it was hard because it was, you're in Manly. As if you're going to perform on course in Manly. I think now that the pass rate, now that it's down to Puckapunyal's through the roof. Yeah. Back in the day, you'd think we're all bookends. Like, none of these guys care. We used to do homework down at the Stain Hotel in Manly. You know, where are the guys all going to go do that Stain? In fact, I reckon the barmaid knew more about comms. And even as FOs, like we do our sub 4, they knew more about Ops EP work and gunnery than we did.
Oh, mate, loose days.
Oh, funny.
And that hotel is still there today,
It's still there today.
Yeah, it's still there today.
Yeah, the Stain. It's, you know, we'd go down there, the man pack. We'd go to the man pack. It was good times. But, I mean, you know, to be an instructor at the school, someone would have to die.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
I mean, literally, because no one wanted to leave.
Yeah. Well, a pretty prime location. And so, what else did you learn? Like, you did your SIG school, like you did your SIGs course, and then did you start to learn? Okay, this is your arty. This is how you fire, all that sort of thing.
Look, I reckon statistically it takes you about 18 months just to work out who's who in the zoo from a rank structure perspective, right?
Yep.
You know what time to be there. You're learning the ropes.
Yep.
About the 24 to 36 month, you start to really feel a little bit more comfortable, and you've got the crew you knock around with.
Yep.
You start to be a bit more, okay, I'm embedding, I'm still a newbie. Mm-hmm. And by the 4-year mark, bang, you know what's going on. You're comfortable, you're doing your job, you know how to do all the bits and pieces that surround it.
Yep.
You're aware of your individual and collective training requirements, right? And that's really important that soldiers understand where their individual training shortfalls are. Because what happened was, for me, it could be anything from, personal fitness. And I think from a gunner's perspective, when it came to fitness, because you did a lot of work with ammunition and guns and everything else, and a lot of it's lifting, it's a lot of manual labour. I used to see a lot of guys get hurt physically because they just weren't physically prepared for what they were going to do, right?
Yep.
So, for example, my first job in the regiment back in 101 was FOCIG. So basically, I was in the foot battalion as an FOCIG when Jim Moreland was the CO of 6RR.
Yeah, right.
Jesus. Jim. Right. People know Jim, right? Smart guy. Hard guy, knows his business. And he was one of the people that we used to do an 80 clicker around Greenbank, right? We used to do this 80 click advanced to contact.
Yeah, right.
And we used to do it around Greenbank. And so each company, support company, everything else, we'd go in and we'd have to do this 80K route march basically around Greenbank Range. And so we had to do that within, I think it was, from memory, 36 hours. So you go in battle order, advance to contact. So the lead-up training through that year, and I think there'll be a couple of guys out there that know this, but the lead-up training, you'd start, as soon as you come back from leave, like after we finished Christmas leave, bang, 5-clicker, straight into it. And you'd slowly work up to that 80K. Now, Jim, right, if you didn't pass, he had you back the next weekend.
Yeah, right.
100%. Tough guy, Jim. Respect. Some guy doesn't go on an all-call pilot's course, right, and is an idiot. You know what I mean? So I had a lot of respect for Jim. In fact, last time I saw him was in Sydney at Australia Square in Sydney. He was grabbing a brew. His office must have been pretty close, and I remember we just caught up, and I was just reminded, and he was like, "Oh." Then we sort of caught up because I remember at one of the at the finish line there once, I said words along the lines of, "For fuck's sake, sir, this shit is fucking fucked." But Jim's a big guy, right?
Yeah.
So he could stride out.
Yep.
And here's all these little fellas struggling along, still carrying the 60 kilos, mate. Right, you're still punching 60 kilos.
Yep.
Yeah, good times.
I actually interviewed him. So I actually had the honour before he passed to interview him, and just an amazing man. Like, I heard a lot of guys had a lot of respect for him, and
100%.
one of the officers that had respect, unlike some that we, but lovely man to talk to and get his thoughts on, why he was a proud serviceman, and was that so full kit? So you're in full kit, right, and so you passed,
Well, and that was what I was saying earlier. It's you saw people get injured, and it's not a good space to be in because you're carrying that injury for a period of time, and there's every chance that if you don't improve, that you go down the Mech 4. I don't know what they call it these days, but you go to Mech 3 and you go through the full rehab process, and then if you drop back to Mech 4, there's every chance that you might be sort of given the thanks for coming and
the med discharge.
Yeah, the med discharge.
Right.
So and that sort of scared me a lot because I never wanted to be in that space. So I used to train really hard, and that was everything from pack work and whatever else I was doing. Running, I used to struggle at running at you know. So I really knew that I had to concentrate on that. So, yeah, that's, yeah.
And where'd you post into after initial employment training?
So straight into one, well, it was 6th Brigade at the time, 7th Brigade here in Brisbane.
Yeah,
so,
right. And for that, how were you received as a young 17-year-old when you got to the regiment?
Oh, look, you're on the bottom rung, you know. Welcome to the unit. Go get us Mornos. You know, it was that sort of, you've got to prove yourself,
Yep.
right? And you're coming into an established team of people who have already got established relationships.
Yep.
You've got to establish yourself, and you've got to prove that you're, you know, you're worthy to be a part of that team. And so it's hard work. You've got to get in and you've got to work hard. And so, you know, you're still green. You're still going through the process of what you learned on your courses and everything else, and that's okay. But you've got to make the effort, you know, and that's just like anything in life, you know. You've got to make the effort. Doesn't matter what happens when you get out or if you stay in. You've always got to look at things and think, well, I've got to do the best bloody job here that I possibly can to not only be accepted, but be considered as a worthy teammate.
So for you, I'm like, as you said, you lived in Goulburn and Cooter, and then what was it like getting up here in Brisbane and experiencing what Brisbane was like?
Well, they're cane toads up here, aren't they? You know, it was, mate. This is the you know, the late 80s, early 90s,
Yep.
right? So I was quite proud to walk around in my New South Wales jersey and, you know, walk up and down Queen Street Mall going, you know, come on, cane toads.
Maybe not now.
Not now. Yeah. Well, you know, not now. It hasn't been for a while, to be honest. But anyway, we won't talk about that. No. But you know, it was a culture shock. It always is, because you're going from one place, from a small country town, to coming to another state by yourself with a bunch of guys who are just as wide-eyed as you are, into a unit full of, you know, seasoned soldiers. You know, these guys had been around for a while and they were all just as good as the next bloke, you know. And
at that time too, Mark, I want to highlight too that for a lot of the younger listeners, we were in a peacetime army, so there wasn't anything. No. So you were just doing your drills, going through, and obviously, as I said at the start of the podcast, you deployed to Cambodia in '93. And what was that like, mate? Because, as I said, it was a peacetime army. So were you chomping at the bit? Like, this was it? And how did you get, like, how were you selected to go to Cambodia?
So the way I was selected was basically BSM at the time, Brian McCarthy, opened up the orderly room window. I was in the lines, and all I could hear was, Huck, the BSM wants you. And I've looked out over the balcony, he's opened the window, he goes, hey, Huck, you want to go to Cambodia? I said, have I got a choice? He goes, nah. And I went, righto, sir. And that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So that was it.
That was it.
Yeah. And
pack your bags, champ, you're off.
So, but for you now, like, obviously, like, deployments were few and far between then.
Yeah.
Looking back now, bit of excitement to go, or?
Look, we had RCB, right, Rifle Company Butterworth, and I can say, and guys who were around back in those times will recognise this, everyone wanted to go to RCB, right? So whether it was one of the battalions were going, there was never really a non-infantry type unit to lead. It never happened.
Yep.
It was always an infantry unit, right? And you may supplement as a section, or you might make up the numbers.
Yep.
Okay, but it was run by an infantry battalion. I never got the opportunity to go to RCB until 2003 with 812.
Yep.
We led the charge, and we had guys coming in from one armoured, a couple of guys from 5-7, which was great. Steve Scanlon came in from 3RAR. A few guys might know Steve. Steve came in as and he helped with the training and whatnot from an ops perspective. But a great opportunity, you know, for training particularly. I've never, you know, you'll never go on an activity you like RCB and never fire as much ammunition and do as much training as you would if you were back here in Australia.
Yeah, right.
So you'd probably get about almost a battalion's allocation of ammo per rotation.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
It was pretty good. And, you'd find the guys, IMTs or infantry minor tactics skills would go from a mediocre sort of level to incredibly advanced on that trip.
Yep.
And it was great. It was a great activity, and I think it's if people are out there and they're not sure, I think well worth getting on board.
Yeah, right. And so you mentioned that. So out the window, Huck, you're going to Cambodia.
Yeah.
And it's like these days very different now. You have lead up training. And
Oh,
all that.
yeah.
So what was it like when you got into country, and for you, what was your role over there, and how long was your deployment?
So lead up training was 10 days. That's it.
Wow.
It was 10 days. Don't step on this. Watch out for that. Don't eat this. If they say that, this is what it means. Good luck. Basically.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we never really got a CONOPS, right? We were just basically told, okay, you're going over as a part of a SIG regiment, basically, 3 squadrons. You'll get your deployment or allocation of where you're going to go once you get into country. There's a lot of trepidation because, if you think about Kampuchea, right? You think about what it was like in the 70s with the Khmer Rouge. By the time we got there in the early 90s, anyone over the age of 12 was suffering from acute PTSD. Every single person in that country was suffering from some form of PTSD. Life over there wasn't worth much, right? I remember seeing a truck accident and this guy was half dead and they threw him on the side of the road and just cracked on. And here's this poor prick dying. And so we're like, shit. This is getting a bit extreme, but, we had to help this bloke, right? We did. And, that sort of started to give you the idea of what this thing was like. It would be, bodies floating down the river. Who owns them? Well, who knows? You just pull them out and you hand them over to the cops, and 2 days later, the same body's floating past again. You're like, I just gave you this guy. They just didn't care.
Yeah, right.
There was one point where, when I got into country, I was given 2 days, about a week of, acclimatisation, and you're basically going in and they're giving you lectures about, who the different factions were, which is really important.
Yep.
You knew their insignia because each one would be a little bit different to the next. The different political affiliated organisations, because that was really important. You understood that too, because it's all about, this election that was coming up. Mm-hmm. And then you realise quickly that you were going to be on your Pat Malone with a bunch of questionably experienced observers from third world countries. And then you start to sort of realise that, you're not in Kansas anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then you start getting reports. And I would suggest that the contingent, one way or another, was in contact every day.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And because, Mark, for people who aren't aware, and like I don't know a lot about Cambodia, and it's what was our main role over there? What was happening in the country?
We were we just basically comms, right? We were just passage of information from the observers back through to the headquarter groups, right? We'd have a centralised comsend, which would have the majority, like me, about 5 or 6 guys there. Then we'd have, 4 or 5 dets that were out in the Ulus.
Yep.
That would be up at the coalface.
Yeah, right.
Right. And you'd be by yourself though, right? Mm-hmm. And because you were by yourself and you were armed, the UNMOs expected you to be the protection party, right? And quite often you were. And it was quite funny. I remember sitting there once with, there was a Pat Windsor Brown, a colonel out of British Army. Pat, I think, remember from memory, I think he might have been, I can't remember if he was an engineer or a SIG Corps officer. But anyway, well, we sat down and I sat across the table from some of these guys, mate. And they were heavy hitters, these cats. and you're sitting there like, holy shit. These guys would not think twice about putting a bullet in you. I mean, there was often, you'd have some of these units that, whether they were there as an infantry or they were there as engineering or whatever, invite the local faction in, and they'd have a shootout just because they're jerks. And they were tools. They were absolute flogs, a lot of them. I never trusted one of them. And you couldn't trust them. But at the same time, you sort of got involved with the kids. You do a few things for them. And the next thing you know, they're like your little, they're telling you everything that's going on in the place. Oh, yeah, Dad went out last night and he did this and he brought this back. And you're like, oh, grief. You start to find out stuff about what's going on around the place. And sure enough, it was going on.
Yeah, right.
So the things you didn't see at nighttime's the fun time, right?
Yeah, right.
Nighttime was the fun time. So you always had to have your wits about you at night. And but because you're on your own, you might have, I don't know, it could be someone from India or Pakistan or wherever that was acting as protection, but then they were guided by their own ROE, which may be influenced by their home country, and were there just as in body only, and that happened a few times, and you'd try to get a bit of assistance, and the buggers wouldn't come out of their little compound, and you're like, yeah, here we go. So it was an interesting space. I mean, there was plenty of things that were quite unfortunate that happened, plenty of mine incidents. I mean, there was, I think one of my mates, this guy was collecting all sorts of munitions that he'd find when he was out either planting rice or whatever, and a lot of these plastic mines, I can't remember the name, POM-Z or POM-Vs or whatever they were called, and these things used to float in the water, right? So they'd wash off the mountains or they'd wash out the creeks, and they just end up everywhere. And these guys would collect them, and they think, oh yeah, it doesn't work, and he'd stack them, right? And it'd only take like a gram of pressure for one of these things to go off.
Yep.
And so, he kept stacking these things up, and the bottom ones are getting heavier and heavier and heavier, and then it detonated one day and took him and his family out. But they just used to think that, that doesn't work. But you couldn't convince them that, mate, this is a live munition. You've got to be very careful.
Yep.
Even to a point that even during the wet season was really dangerous, because they used to, well, I don't know if that still happens, but I remember being in Sveiring, and the bloke next door used to have twin 12.7 anti-aircraft gun, right? Twin barrels. And when the storm would start and the lightning, he used to roll this thing out and start laying into the clouds.
Yeah, right.
Because it was the storm gods, right? The gods of right? And, I mean, there was a gun battery down the road, the Cambodian Army gun battery, and they started hooking in with 105s. And then they'd look at you and go, why don't you get involved? And you're like, mate, why? And they go, well, we've got to scare the gods off. I'm like, dude.
It's a storm.
You're going to waste a shitload of ammo. That's all you're going to do. And someone's going to wear it.
Yeah.
That stuff's going to come down somewhere. And it did.
Yeah, right.
Quite often. So it was a crazy place, but you've got to remember these people were, they were in workers' camps. Anyone who had half a brain was either put to death or, and you had glasses. You could drive a car. Mate, you got a bullet in the head. That's the way it was. And so you're looking at a society that was basically starting from scratch once again. And yeah, there's tough times.
I was going to say, for a 22-year-old, you were 22 at that stage. Did you have some close calls yourself?
I think we all did one point or another. It's, look, I won't get into it, but yeah, there was a couple of occasions there that it got pretty tricky, and you had to decide very quickly whether you went on with something or you just let it go, because the one thing we knew, no one was coming to save you. I mean, where the guys were at Sveiring, where I ended up being down there on the Vietnam border, Those guys down there, they were an hour and a half away, and if you went up to Siem Reap, it was the same. And that's by car.
Wow. Yeah.
And there's no one coming in a helo, no one's coming to save you. And I mean, that was the one thing we had to keep in mind. It's, mate, you have to be very diplomatic, how you carry yourself. Mm-hmm. But that's not to say we didn't, brace people up. I do know that with an F88 that I learnt that we only had for the first couple of years, that you could butt stroke someone and it worked. So if anyone out there thinks you can't butt stroke someone with an F88, you sure as hell can. It got to a point where, because we were only given a Steyr and five mags, right?
5 mags.
5 mags.
30 round mags?
30 round mags. And things started to escalate. All of a sudden, the minimisers started to appear. And none of us had been trained on a minimi. But when it got thrown to me, they just said, hey, mate, that's just like an M60. And I went, treat it like an M60 and you'd be right. And I was like, righto. So I did. But that's, everyone's got their own experience over there, and it varies quite a lot, but I would say that a lot of the guys, we'd had a lot of rub points, but we had to be incredibly careful because a lot of us were out there by ourselves, and these guys didn't care about human life, mate. I can tell you now. There was a family was chopped up with a machete for a pig, chopped them up, kids and all, a lot.
All
So I had to load these poor buggers on a truck.
So were you, as you said, a lot of the time you're on your own, but did you have to report to someone?
Oh, yeah. So you did your daily reports. You're always in radio contact. But you quite often found yourself out on patrol as well. And so, if you were doing something like, because a lot of illegal trade and once you start impacting on someone's ability to make money, right, you become less important, right? That's something that I've learned. If you're starting to impact on someone's ability to make money, you become less important. So, you had to be really diplomatic in the way you did things, because sometimes when they would do something that was basically illegal, well, you're by yourself, champ. What are you going to do? And you had to have that in the back of your mind always.
Yep.
Always.
So for you being over there, were you, as you said, pretty gruesome stuff to be exposed to? How'd that play on you mentally? Like, were you okay, or?
Yeah, I think, look, it affects different people different ways, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I don't sort of, it's not something that I think about all the time. I remember certain people. I've got photos of people that are no longer with us.
Yeah, right.
There was and it's just an interesting it's actually a really interesting question. I sort of look at people that live on there's a spectrum, right? And some people, like I've got mates to this day, and there's guys that I used to, it's another story about security, but, they could knock you over and go home and read their kids a storybook and not think twice. I know guys like that.
Yeah, right.
There are guys like that.
Yeah.
On the same token, they hear a rifle crack in the distance and they're crawling under their bed or into their pit, right? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just who they are, right? And I think it's important to just recognise that. You just don't know what you'll do when the time comes.
Yep.
I don't care who you are.
Yeah. No, it's a very valid point. And so your Cambodia trip was 12 months?
12 months we were over there. I got the unenvious role to take all our gear down to Sihanoukville and sit on the port and wait for some clown to come and pick up all our gear. But at the same time, we were asked to get rid of... Because we didn't have EOD specialists back in those days, so we couldn't get rid of the ammunition.
Oh, right.
And so, because we couldn't get rid of the ammunition, right, we had to physically get rid of it.
Yeah, right.
So, as you can imagine, right, we started off, which looked to be a bit of a range shoot, which just turned into this. Just get rid of it, right, at the end. I mean, we even had locals. Get over here, mate. Get on this. Local copper standing. Come here, mate. Get on that. Yeah, put that 1,000 rounds through. With bloody CLP bottles squirting the box. Yeah, keep going. You'll be right. Oh, it was manic. And we had 66s and claymores that had to go. And oh my God.
Yeah, right. So what? Just a year of just supply, pretty much, 2 years.
Well, whatever was there.
Yeah, right.
You know, we had to get rid of the lot because they just couldn't take it back to country. We couldn't bring it back to Australia. And because we couldn't bring it back, we couldn't dispose of it like you would on any other operation. Mm-hmm. So we had to basically physically get rid of it.
Yeah, right.
So it was crazy. You know, it was
wild times.
It was just, for God's sakes. I can't remember there was a young subby, I can't remember his name, he was a good bloke. And the sergeant, he was a Sea Corps sergeant.
Yep.
Great blokes. Because we started off with the intention of doing this correctly.
Yep.
Right? As you would. But you've got so much. There's only so much you can give of with a 30-round magazine load. I'm not doing that anymore, right? And then, you know, the funniest part was when I got back to Australia and the first thing I got off the plane, go to Henneberry, you have to qualify for AIRN and you need to go and qualify for the F-88. I went, what?
I was just shooting him over there.
Fuck off, mate.
Oh, mate, that's...
You know? What? Oh, yeah, you've got to do it for AIRN compliance. I said, what is AIRN compliance? Oh, this new thing that's come out. And I'm like, what?
Have you not seen what I've been doing for the last 12 months?
What are we doing, mate? Calm down, champion. You know.
Oh, so you come back and then you pretty much straight away after your 12 months away, you then almost immediately went on to the 12th
leave without pay.
Yeah, leave without pay. Yep.
So the biggest mistake we made, I think, was when we came back. They basically sent us away on leave. Mm-hmm. Right. It wasn't a good leave period, as you can imagine. So you've come back overseas, and a lot of guys heightened. You go back to a small country town. You're dislocated from all the people, right? And you feel very, it's very alone, right? And you go through a lot of mental gymnastics yourself. And you don't know why. Mm. You know what I mean? You sort of sit there and you don't know why you're going through all these emotions, and you're sitting there and you keep reaching for something for your rifle and it's not there. It's automatic. Mm. You keep reaching for it, right? It's not there. You keep, I mean, it got that silly that at night sometimes I'd wake up under the bed.
Yeah, right.
Because my bed, for a majority I was there, was like this sandbagged pit that I slept in, because you just don't know when these idiots start shooting. You just don't know where the shit's going to end up. They might have a yippee shoot. Next thing you know, your place is getting showered with AK rounds at 7.62s.
Yeah, right.
Right? You don't know where it come from.
Yep. So
you had to be a little bit savvy around that sort of thing, right? And so, so you go through these emotions and there's nothing there to help you. There's no open arms, none of that crap, right? No one you can just ring up and talk to because you don't talk to people.
Not back in that time, yeah.
No,
you're a man.
Hold on.
Do. Yep.
Be right. And so that's when I started drinking. pretty heavily, I'd say.
Trying to find a self-medication in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're sort of hitting the cans and someone bumps into you and then it's on, right? And you fight. Or you go looking for it, right? And I think it's not the right way, but what no one could tell me any different. You know, there was no one there to sort of sit there and soundboard with, you know, and it was something that I did, and you know, I sort of caught myself a bit, and I didn't want to go back to work, but I always knew that I wanted to finish because I left in year 10, I wanted to finish year 12.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the opportunity at Golden TAFE to finish my HSC through adult education process, the program they had there. And so I did that. So I took 12 months leave without pay, and because I just still couldn't adjust. You know, I was just all over the place because you want to go back, right?
Yeah. And, like, want to go back to the regiment or go back to camp? Like, go back to...
back on ops.
Oh, country, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You want to go back.
Because you didn't feel like...
Because it's comfortable. You had outcomes and you
Yep.
were delivering and you were doing something.
Yep.
And you know, the heightened sense of adrenaline,
Yep.
you know, it was there and it was comfortable and it was good. You didn't mind.
So in that, it's a key point you touch on, Mark, that I think that a lot of veterans that go overseas on deployment actually struggle to come back to the normal reality of what, you know, normal life is like and not being on op. It's a really good point you touch on.
Yeah, look, if you think about, you know, if I think about what my uncles and grandfather, you know, they came back to Australia after the Second World War. Their whole life pivoted on that. It's true.
Yeah,
you talk to anyone who a World War II veteran, and their whole life, regardless of what they did post army or post World War or post the war, it all comes back to that 4 or 5 years that they spent in uniform, right? And so from that point, you know, I listened to that, and it sort of resonates because you know, and I'm not saying that, you know, I'm different from anyone else or, you know, their story's different. It's just that in my opinion, it was something that I missed. You know, I was really keen to go back into it. Yep. You know, but I don't think I was ready. I don't think the tools were there to help me readjust. And that was a problem. Because once I came home, then the boozing started, the violence. I think it was one point because mum at the time was running security at Kmart and worked with the local coppers, and, you know, they basically said, hey, you know, Mark's got the whole town in one corner, you know, and that's not good.
No.
It's not good. And I didn't really try to. I was just trying to work out what the fuck was going on.
And at that time too, like you say, no AAR, no after action review, no decompression, just
straight back into it.
Straight back into it. And so for you, as you mentioned, you wanted to finish your HSC, which you did,
yeah.
And then you post back in to 8th 12 Regiment in Sydney. And what was that like? As you mentioned, was it good to get back into the family of Green again?
Look, it was, but somehow along the lines there, I also started to do a bit of door work.
Yep.
Because it stopped me from drinking, right? So I was active. On a Friday and Saturday night, I was active. So I was working, which was a good thing. It was almost like that was my, what do you call it?
Release?
No, not release. It was almost like my therapy.
Yep.
Right? So I was dealing with people. Instead of getting on the cans and causing trouble, I was, on my weekends that I had available, I was working, the doors up in the cross and around the place.
So for you doing that, and like there's probably some stories that stand, because that's what, mid-90s?
Yeah, so from about 95, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah.
So all the colourful identities of the cross.
Well, at the time, yeah, so I was very cautious about people knowing who I was. So I used to run with a pseudonym.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So this is going to get interesting. So when you look at those TV programs about Up the Cross and the Times,
Underbelly,
yeah, I know those guys.
Yeah,
and
right.
So I had to be very careful to try and separate. Look, the money was great, Adam. I can't, $60 an hour, $60, $70 an hour getting paid cash.
Wow. Yeah, right.
What are you going to do? Do you want to go and blow your cash or your wage, or do you just want to stand on a door, keeping idiots out, and get paid a whack of money? Well, I think I'm going to take back a whack of money.
Yeah. Yep.
But you had to be really careful, because up there at the time, obviously, there was ecstasy was hitting the streets, right? And it was big.
Yep.
I can't describe how big it meant, because it was dangerous. It was bloody dangerous, because what was happening is you had a lot of people who wanted to get a bite of the cherry, right? So you had all the bike clubs. You had T5.
Yep.
T5 gang were getting up there.
5Ts, yeah.
5Ts, those guys. You had all these characters, right? And so I'm getting paid $70 an hour worth of give a fuck, okay? So, you had to be, again, incredibly diplomatic, and you had to know your P's and Q's, because I'm still got to walk home, back to my car by myself, or to the train to get home.
Mm.
So I don't care about anything other than me making it home safely.
Yep.
Right. To a point where I used to take different routes home. I used to stay at guys I used to work with. I used to stay at their place, because I was trying to... You knew when someone was keeping an eye on you, right? It was just the environment.
Yep.
There were guys up there I know got disappeared.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they'd be there one week. You would never see them again. We used to have a place called the Rooftop at the King's Cross Hotel, and that place was a real trance sort of techno, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And, one more night I go up there and I thought because we never used to put people up there, never needed to, right? It was just all these dancing people.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they're harmless. But I thought, I'll just do a walk around, get up there, and they're in the some chill out room or whatever it was back in the day, and there's these flash of lights underneath the spiral staircase getting up to the dance floor. I'm like, what's going on over there? So I went over and casually saw this guy, and he was just loaded, this kid. Pills and money. And I straight away thought, someone owns this kid. And your self-protection mode goes on, right? Ding, the light goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you need to be really careful. So I said, mate, you need to get out. So took him down the bottom, got rid of him, said, right, fuck off. Because you can't have it in there, because if the cops come in and they find it, there's all sorts of trouble. So you've got to play a really central line on this stuff.
Yep.
But the amount of money, and as I was saying earlier, when you put a dollar sign against something, people will do all sorts of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that I'm some sort of, messiah at this sort of thing or whatever, but I quickly started to learn how dangerous this was, because there were certain security companies who were getting paid $10 an hour, but would supplement their wage by how much gear they could push in the clubs.
Yeah, right.
And so they were winning contracts based on how much they were tendering for the contract. And so the owners of the place are going, sure, not knowing that they've just let a drug gang into the place who's just going to sell all sorts of shit, right? And it was a really dangerous time, Adam, because, you know, as I said, when there's a dollar sign against something, everyone wants a piece.
Yep.
So I used to do a bit of work there. I did a bit of work up and down Oxford Street, DCM back in the day. That was a bit of a dangerous one. And there was one place I used to work at called, and I used to do it odd times over there. I knew the owners. They were okay sort of people. A place called Sugar Reef. And mate, there's celebrities and there's certain people around the place that I know, right, that I've seen do stuff. And I'm not sort of judging, but what I am saying is it is at every level of society. I don't care what anyone says. You know, and for me, I'm a bit of an anti sort of character. Because I've seen the outcomes, and it's something that I don't think. You know, there's a lot of people walking around the streets today. I'll turn around and say, "Oh, you know, this is good. Oh, we should do this. We should do that." But the reality is, it's not good because, you know, kids are doing it now in schools. You know.
Yeah, it seems to have been through society, mate. You know it too yourself that it seems to just be the norm now. Like, you know, like it's it's part of society, and you know it's really it's a sad state of affairs.
Look, you're right. How do you? I don't know how to solve the problem, mate. I'm not here to solve that, but it's really, it's just the way society has gone. You know, I think we've sort of stepped away from that. I remember when I was a kid, you know, it was pretty tough, but everyone was pretty straight up and down, you know. And now you don't know who you're talking to or what their backgrounds are or what they're involved with. But as I said, mate, once you put a dollar sign against something, the game changes.
And for you, as you say, it was a dangerous, dangerous time. And, you know, that world, it was... And for you, because you still green roll during the week, then you're doing this,
Yep.
and, like, two different worlds.
Yes.
For you... Did you sort of go, oh, geez, like, what am I... Did you question sometimes what you were doing like that, you know, working the doors and, like, because you had the green roll?
Yeah, look, but again, you know, like I said, there's a dollar sign against it, right? And it becomes a bit of a, hey, I'm making money out of this.
Yeah.
But at some point, you start to ask yourself whether it's worth it or not. And as I said, mate, there were guys up there that I used to work with who... You know, they're no longer around. You know, back in the time, they just sort of
disappeared.
Go.
Yeah.
You know, and no one would say anything. Or guys you knew would be on the street, just go.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a pretty dangerous time because, you know, I remember we were there one night and it was I had a bit of leave, and so I offered to do a couple of weeknights, and I remember it was a cold day or cold night in August. I remember this, and this guy came in with. You know, and that was, you know, houses, right? And, you know, they were off their chops on whatever it was. And it became one of the... I thought I was going to get killed that night. This guy went off. Yeah. And he had the strength of 10 men, this guy. And here's me. I'm rolling around on the floor with him after he tried to hit one of the barmaids with something. I don't know what had happened, but, you know, she's hit the panic button and I've come in and I'm by myself, and this guy's just going absolutely off the deep end. What do you do? I'm trying to get him out the door, you know, and then he's got his crazy girlfriend trying to swing stuff at me. And thankfully we had plastic cups in those days because I wore about 5 of them.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, I finally got him outside, but I mean, I'd put him in arm locks and, you know, I was putting everything on this guy, everything I knew, you know. Finally got him outside, and it's freezing cold. He's ripped his shirt off. Give me the double bicep shot, and he comes charging back up the stairs at me. And that's when I started to question, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
You know?
Is it worth
Is it worth it?
Is it worth my life?
And so, you have these little moments in life where you go, it's been fun. Yeah. But had he, and thankfully the cops turned up and we got him down and handcuffed and they put him away and sent him to wherever they were going to send him. But I stood there and I was actually pretty beaten up, just pretty knocked, I was. And
I'm guessing you would have been a good fighter too.
Look, I'm not a trained fighter, but I sort of know my way around how to do a few things. So I'm not sort of, I'm not going to say that I'm some sort of black belt in something, but I've had my learning curves in life.
Yep.
So, but it was really coming down to how that whole thing started. I started to recognise that it was time to sort of leave that, and I got the opportunity to get posted up to Darwin with 1 Brigade, 1 Brigade headquarters, and I grabbed that. I said, get me out of here. And it's interesting looking back because there was some of the guys I worked with who were really good guys. I look back at some of the names of the people that I worked with, and I would have recruited them in. They were the same guy. They were the same as me. They just took a different route.
Yeah.
Some of them got caught up more deeply, as you can imagine, with things. And I've never been in contact with them, if that's what you're asking. But I do remember them quite clearly as being, they were good people, They just
chose a different path.
And they got dealt a different hand. Had I not been braced up way back in 87 in an office by a magistrate,
you probably would have gone down that path.
Probably would have gone there.
And, mate, if we look, no one's got a crystal ball, but you might not be here.
No.
Yeah, you might be, you might be down with the fish, or like
spend the rest of my life in prison.
Exactly. So you, as you say, really looking back where you are now, mate, and what you've gone on to do, that magistrate sort of saved you from taking a really wrong turn. And as we say, some people say it that, that they go out with mixed feelings about the army. The army actually saved you.
Oh, absolutely.
And it made you who you are today.
Yeah, 100%. It gave me direction.
Yep.
It gave me... It put me in a position where I wasn't top dog. I didn't feel that I had to... I was down the packing order, And I think that's really important for young men, in my opinion, to go through that, particularly guys that come from, tough backgrounds, because sometimes they only respect those who understand or have come from the same place they have.
Yep.
Right. And I see a lot of guys around today who I think would be absolutely fantastic troops, soldiers, but it would also give them the opportunity to just find their feet, and not realise that they have to be a certain way in order to get somewhere. You know what I mean? It's an interesting question, mate. I look, we could talk to the cows come home about where we are with recruiting and defence, but I think that a majority of the guys that I'd come from sort of had the same background as I did.
Well, a lot of them, mate. The theme across multiple podcasts, I've recorded over 100 podcasts now, and most of the theme between veterans and first responders, mate, is the guy who was told in school he'd amount to nothing, lacked direction, sort of was at a crossroads and either chose to go first responder or military, and because of that, like their service in either first responder or military, it's made them who they are today. And they're grateful for that choice of making that decision to go either first responder or military. And I think, mate, any young player, anyone that listens to this, Mark, that, is a young player that is having a listen and maybe on that cusp of, You know, do I go down that path or do I go down? Take a bit of advice from Mark and myself is that, you know, maybe don't go down that road and choose because crime doesn't pay.
Well, it's not just that, mate. They're not going to be there if something goes wrong.
That's right.
You know, it's this is the big thing is when you look at and it might seem very, what's the word, inviting, and, you know, it might seem, you know, exciting in a lot of ways. It's just not, you know, because when you wake up, they're not there. You know, your mates aren't, those guys you thought were your mates, they're not there, you know.
And if push comes to shove, like, you know, they'll roll on you very quickly.
Oh, look, without a shadow of a doubt, you know, and I do feel sorry for. Look, but I mean, you know, that was that time, and it was therapy for me for a while to try and sort of just get some semblance of getting my head back in the game, because, and just dealing with humans on a constant basis, which sort of, you know, helped me with Army, but it also helped me in my current job, right? So you could sort of read into people a little bit more and have a little bit more empathy.
Yeah.
And I have said before that I actually do. I have to be honest. I do lack empathy. Right. I'm not an empathetic person by nature, but I can relate to people. You know, and it's helped me do that.
Yeah.
Because you see people who, you know, and you just look at them and they're some of the lovely people, but just in the wrong space, you know, they're doing the wrong thing and they don't know any better.
Yeah.
You know, and who am I to sit there and start telling them how to live their lives? It's not what I'm there to do.
No, that's right. And for you, as you mentioned, you get to Darwin in 98.
Yep.
And as you say, you know, you question and working the doors of down in Sydney, and then you go up there and work the doors.
Fell
mate.
into it again.
And what was that like, mate? Getting up to and getting up to Darwin, like you joined in 88.
Yep.
So 10 years in the Army now at this stage, and are you a full track at this stage?
I was a Lance Jack.
You're a Lance Jack,
Yeah.
right? So bit of responsibility. Get up to Darwin. How were you received when you got up there, and then? How long did you work the doors up there before you finally gave it away?
It wasn't too long I was up there. It was just one of those things where I bumped into a guy up there who was running a couple of different places, and, you know, we were just talking one night, and I'd moved in. I was in a shared place, and with a guy who was working for the Air Service Australia as a firing, actually. It was his brother. And we just got talking, and I said, oh, look, I used to do a bit of work in Sydney, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's just as a point of conversation. And he just said, look, mate, would you be keen to come and give us a bit of a hand? We're always looking for guys who can manage people. And I said, I'd look into it. Yeah, no dramas. And at the time, there was no real need to tell anybody that you were doing a second job. You know, it was just before Timor kicked off. You know, and I was still single at the time, and so it didn't really affect me. I didn't have much to do. I didn't know anyone, and I thought, it's a good way to socialise with the locals and get to know who's who in the zoo. And it was. You got to know a lot of the ringers and the fishers, you know, all rough boys. But you know, I played a bit of footy up there, which was great. So I got involved with the local community. But it was just it was a totally different place to play, you know. Everybody basically knew everyone, you know. So you very rarely had any issues with anybody, to be honest. It was just that it was a mandatory to have guys on the door, and I made a lot of really good friends in Darwin at the time, and it was good.
And for you up there, what was it like, the heat up there? Because it's a different heat. What was that like for you?
Look, Darwin would have to be the hottest place on the planet. I've been all over Asia, and, you know, I've done a bit over in the US and whatever, but Darwin has to be the hottest place on the planet. It really is. It's just, it's hotter than anywhere in Indonesia, I reckon.
Yeah, right.
Hotter than up in Vietnam and Cambodia and Malaysia, Thailand. It's stifling heat, right?
Yeah, right.
It's actually quite funny because when I first got up there, I never had air conditioning, right? So you get up there in about mid-December.
Yep.
Welcome to first grade.
Yes, I've heard it's very hot and dry and just, yeah.
The dry season's brilliant. You know, guys have been posted up there or have travelled or holidayed. The dry season in the Northern Territory is fantastic. You know, it's just brilliant weather. It's almost like a dry summer down here. You know, it's just that when it goes into that build-up around sort of late August, September, October, November, going into December, January, February,
Yep.
where it's the real wet season.
Yep.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough work.
So, mate, you're up there, and then where were you when 9/11 happened, and what do you remember that day? Everyone knows where they were. Where were you on that day?
Mate, we were actually on an exercise with an MEU. I think it might have been 16 or 13 MEU, right?
Yeah,
They were in town.
Yep.
I remember this. A lot of guys up there at the time remember this. MEU was in town. We're out at Mount Bundy that week, and we're shooting, you know, having a whale of a time out there with the guys. And I remember being in town, I think we were at a place called Shenanigans, and it would have been 11 o'clock, right? Having beers with the boys because they were about to get on the boat and bugger off somewhere else. And then everything stopped, big screen, straight onto the news, and one of the towers on fire. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, geez, this is unreal. And within I don't know, and the media's talking, and the whole place stopped. And we're all looking at it, and we're like, what the hell's going on here? What? And then the second plane hit. And then that's when everyone like, holy shit. And at the same time, there were shore police, Mitchell Street. Let's go. And everyone out of the pubs, all the guys on foot running to the ship. And not soon, long after, they were gone. They were gone.
Yeah, right.
And then here's us going, right, what are we doing? Well, nothing. Sit down, champ. Get another beer. You know, we sort of sat back and we were like, what you know, who are we fighting? You know, who? And honestly, that was what was through my mind. Is right, it's on.
Yeah.
Who are we going at?
We're going to war now.
Yeah,
Yep.
who are we going at?
Yep.
And that was the first thing that came to my mind is right, it's on. And that was the way I thought from that point, from that incident.
Yeah, right. And it was a day that changed the world, mate. I remember it too. I was 8 years old, and I went to turn Cheese TV on and watch my cartoons, and then my initial reaction, mate, was I thought, oh, geez, this is a good movie. And then, because as a kid, it doesn't compute. And then when I watched people start jumping out of the building, I've gone, oh, shit, that's not a movie.
So my cousin David lives in New York.
Yep.
And he was there the day the planes hit, right?
Yeah, right.
He was on his way to work. And the sirens and everything's going off. He didn't even bother looking up, right? He didn't even see it. And then he was down around that district. And the second plane hit. And he remembers on the ground looking up and seeing the whole thing happen.
Wow.
Yeah, and when the buildings collapsed, he was in the middle of that when all the
Yeah,
dust and
right.
everything. Yeah, so his recollection's quite vivid of what happened.
Oh, geez, that would be, seeing it live. Like we saw it live on TV.
Yeah.
He was there, like.
Yeah, it still affected him quite a bit, you know, because he had friends that were working in that building that have obviously they didn't
Make
come
it.
out.
Yeah.
And he remembers it. Yeah, he doesn't like to talk about that, and I understand.
Yeah.
But you know, when he told me about how this whole thing went down, it's just, you know, you can't sort of
fathom
that sort of something like that incident, which
the noise,
the noise, the whole, and the panic, and and then everyone running to the site to try and people were just digging with their hands, and it's like futile.
Yeah.
But people needed to be doing something.
Yeah.
So it was. That was my.
And for you, what was happening? So you get back, like obviously you come off your exercise, and then what changed at that time? Do you remember what changed around? And did you feel that who we're fighting? And did you feel there's going to be deployments coming up, or?
Well, it was hard, mate, because we come in to work as normal, and then even the CO and the brigade commander is sort of going, well, I mean, obviously the COs are talking to the regiments and the battalions and saying, look, guys, we understand what's occurred here. Stand by to stand by. Obviously, the security of the base went up.
Because you're still up in Darwin at this point?
Still up in Darwin. Then we had, it's always knee-jerk reactions, right? Next thing you know, we've got full guards, and then we've got guards on each gate, coming in and out, and you've got to sign in, sign out, and show your ID, and this sort of rubbish. It's like, boys, come on, I know we're just trying to do something here, but, at one point they're going, right, everyone's going to move into the base, all this sort of thing, and that was like Gulf War One when that kicked off. We did the same thing. But, it was just everyone was... The whole brigade up there was just like, what do we do? What's next? And then obviously what transpired from there transpired. So it was just it was interesting.
And for you after that, so did you do your final period of your time before you got out in Darwin, or did you?
No, I got posted back down to Sydney. I was posted to the Land Warfare Centre for a couple of years. So I went to the Land Warfare Centre as an instructor for the corporal and sergeant courses.
Yep.
Did that for a couple of years, which was good. But interestingly, I had the opportunity to deploy to Iraq. And because I was in training command, so the crux of this story, and it's quite a funny one, but it's not funny, but it's funny. Funny now, it wasn't funny at the time. I was pretty pissed off.
Yeah.
Paul McLaughlin, who was in one div, Paul was, I think he was promoted to, he was Major General, then he got promoted. Out of the blue, I got a phone call and said, hey, Huck, do you want to come with me to Iraq? And I'd known Paul for a long time. He used to be my CO. I've known him for years. Great bloke, And I mean, he's tough as nails, Paul. And a couple of guys in there won't like him, but I actually got on with the guy, so it didn't bother me. And I said, yeah, boss, what are we doing? I said, well, look, I'm getting posted at the end of the year. I'm happy to come. And so, we did the background. I rang the unit I was going to, and I was going across to 2-3 field as a SMIG, so part of the Carter staff there. And they said, yeah, go. We're happy for you to do it, right? So that was all cleared up through 2DIV. And then we went to Land Warfare Centre. Said, right, I want to deploy at the end of the year. Now, the irony was, right, we had 2 SIs go through the Land Warfare Centre.
Yep.
Both deployed. Right. Yeah, you know where this is going.
Yes.
So at the time, the chief had the 1-800 number, have a whinge, right?
Yeah.
And I sat there, and because basically they said to me, nah, we need you for the last course of the year, that's going to be... But it was always undersubscribed. Last course of the year, no one's going to a sub 1 before they go on leave. So anyway, here we go. So I went, nah, I'm not happy with that. I'm going to respond to this chief thing, and I think a few people remember this. So I sent this email. I said, well, this is what's happened, blah, 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 blah. Send. Anyway, oh, Jesus. It was like a bloody... I just rolled a hand grenade down the hallway.
And opened a can of worms.
Right. So anyway, the long and short of it, the chief came back and said, look, I respect the fact that you want to go, and, I'd never stop anyone, but you're in a very important place in training command, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, righto. And you can't go, basically. And I had the shits, as you can imagine.
Yep.
Anyway, the CO of the Land Warfare Centre and the incumbent SI called me in and they were like, "Oh, you put us in a really difficult position." I'm like, "I'm getting posted." "Yeah, but we're going to need you for the last course." Anyway, the last course of the year is 30 people, 8 instructors. 30 people, 8 instructors, and I was like, so we get up here and they were going to run this new course.
Yeah.
So we all go into the one up here at 6th Brigade.
Yep.
We go into this theaterette, the same place where they're doing the mounting, right, of the deployment. So I'm over at Afghans, out of nowhere. Someone goes, "Hey, where are you? You're AWOL." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, your name was called this morning and you didn't present." And I was like, "Yeah, thanks for sticking the knife in." And I went, what's going on? I said, "I can't go." And I saw Paul while I was up here. And he goes, "Mate, look, don't worry about it." And I'll tell you what, mate, it was part of the reason I was like, you know what? It was the last roll of the dice.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I thought, and it pretty much sealed the deal for me to transfer out of uniform. And I sort of started to think, well, I'm getting to the point now in my career where I'm still young enough to start another one, or I'm old enough to sort of hang around and stay with it and become that grumpy old woe one at some point.
Yeah, begrudging. Yeah.
And sort of take, make up the numbers. And because Army was changing, or Defence was changing. It was going away from being the Army that I knew into something that's, I'm sort of struggling to identify now. I'm sort of having a trouble to try and recognise this mob. And
So you took some long service leave, and
Yes.
in 2010.
Yep.
And you then go and start working with who you work for
Connexus.
now. Yeah, Connexus.
So it was interesting. This is actually an interesting story, mate. I actually got an offer to work at CASG in weapons acquisition. Mm-hmm. So I actually went through the APS website and applied to a job down in Canberra.
Yep.
I didn't go. Good people, but all of them are coming from different departments. And coming out of Army, there's an expectation that, we're going to do this, blah, 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 blah. And I sort of kind of thought to myself when I left that interview that they were too nice. And I didn't really connect with them. And I don't know whether they connected with me because I thought they may have felt that I was too,
Yep.
I don't think I fit the APS mantra. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Subsequently, I sat for the New South Wales Police exam, which I was going in for an interview, but I called a mate of mine who I knew from up the cross.
Yeah.
And I said, "Mate, what's it like?" And he goes, "Mate, listen, it's interesting, it's different." I said, "What about me?" And he goes, "Oh, mate," he goes, "I don't know." "Oh, really?" He goes, "Mate, it's changed." Again, they were going through a transition themselves.
Yep.
Then I worked out the fire brigade was only getting paid 4 days a week, right? And then you have to go and do a trade or, stack shelves at Woolworths. And then the last, I actually went for an interview, believe it or not, at a at a dental surgery as an operations manager, right? Okay, this is funny.
Sorry, I'm laughing.
Yeah. So I go for an interview at this dental surgery, and lovely people, inner city Sydney, lovely people. Subsequently, I didn't take the job, but they asked me to come in because they wanted to know whether I was like Gunnery Sergeant Holloway off Heartbreak Hill.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, Huck, because I think of it and I look at it and I see it, and it just doesn't suit you. Like, it's just not.
So here I am in this interview with these two lovely people, and they were in awe that someone like me would apply to do a job. And that was the only reason they asked me to come in. They were like, "Oh, no, you don't got a job." No, not like that though, right? In effect. So, look, I needed to get some career advice. And at the time, mate, there's nothing around. Like, you did your transition seminar. And, I mean, they were good to sit and listen, but did it give me anything I needed at the time? No, it didn't. Right. And so...
Because, and sorry to cut you off,
Yeah.
I just want to say that, because you'd served in the army since 88,
Yeah.
it's all you'd known, 23 years service.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I can understand why you need a bit of help and guide to go, well, where's my next move?
That's it. And, you know, you get onto Pac-Man, it tells you what you're all... And I'd implore everyone to really make sure they understand Pac-Man end to end and not what their entitlements are. I've always said to people, later now, when you join the army, you should plan to get out. Right? And I never planned. Okay? So the time you sign the dotted line and you go through your career, you should always, every step, plan to make... Because you don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. You might get injured.
You might get injured and bang, you're gone, right? Or something may happen, and or maybe a family issue, which happens quite often. Look, I think for me it was really difficult because the transition for me it was really bumpy, Adam. I had a hard time getting out. I'll have to be honest. That's why I took long leave without pay, right? So I took leave without pay because I was still getting a bit of cash out of uniform. I still had, you know, RA, you know, I was getting paid. It sort of helped me make that change. Quite often I'm finding guys now who are taking long service, putting their feet up, and then the last week before they go back to work, ringing me up saying, I don't want to go back. I said, well, what did you just do for the last 3 months? Oh, I had a holiday. What are you doing? You know, go back. Don't be an idiot. Go back. You'll be fine. And sure enough, they are. So it's that knee-jerk reaction I find a lot of guys go through, that when they take their long services, they start contemplating their navel, staring at the ceiling, right? And they haven't really planned. So it's always plan from day one you join, plan to get out, right? And that wasn't advice that I ever got. Anyway. But moving forward, so Connexus, or Kinetic Recruitment at the time, there was a friend of mine who was a recruiter down in Melbourne, and she said, hey, go and see these guys. And so she forwarded my CV to them. Now, I got a phone call. Oh, would you come in and meet us? I said, yeah. Now, I had no idea what they were going to ask me to do, right? So I came in, which was good, and I sat down and wore a suit, you know, and all that sort of stuff, because you want to put in best impression, because I thought they were going to find me a job.
Yep.
And they ended up offering me one with them.
Yeah, right.
Right. But, you know, when they said, oh, I'll come and do recruitment, I really... What do you mean recruitment? What do you mean by that? Because the only recruitment I really understood was...
Army recruitment.
Army, right. Yeah. And then it was the commercial side, but in defence industry. And I think the good part about that was it sort of springboarded off my knowledge in uniform that helped me understand what our primes, SMEs, professional service providers do. Which I think is really important, because you understand the language of the lingo. You can have an appreciation of where people are coming from. I think a difficult part is, you know, not having that understanding and tell the difference between certain skills or experiences, and then try to relate that to someone who doesn't understand can be quite difficult. And it takes a long time. It's not to say you can't do it. It just takes a long time to really pick up the nuances. And so from there, I started with Connexus, or Kinetic then. And I've been there now since I've left Army, and they've been great to me. I can't say they haven't. I mean, they've put up with me, right? And that's a really important point, because that transition for me was really, really difficult.
Well, I understand why, mate, because 23 years, Army was all you knew from when you were 17, and it's a lot of the guys I talked to, mate, that joined at 17 and did 24, 25, 30 years plus. It's all you knew, mate. You, as you say, and we spoke off it, you bled green.
Yeah.
Like, by the end of it, you bled green. That was not at the start, but at the end, you bled green. And so I understand, mate, that it would have been a hard transition. And you, for a while there, mate, you probably... Did you feel that you'd lost your purpose?
I think this is the good thing about working at Connexus. I didn't lose purpose, because I was still having an impact on capability, delivery, and sustainment. Right? And so I always felt that in the back, I was able to help make sure that, and like I said to a lot of clients, my job is to understand your pain and where your hurt statement is when you're looking for personnel. But make sure that the people that we find understand that they're working for the end user, the warfighter, right? And if they have that person in their mind when they're doing this back here, that's half the battle, right? Because, you talk to guys who have deployed, even when I deployed, we got kit that just didn't work, right? It just didn't, and then you had gear that absolutely just tore the building down because there was that warfighter in mind. And so that helped me adjust to that. So staying with that environment, talking to people who are ex-uniform, like even some of my clients and some of my best mates are all, senior officers that have been out for years now. We're, and now it's, we catch up. It's important, I think, those relationships to be maintained.
Absolutely.
And you're never going to agree with everyone, right? If you agree with everyone, you're an idiot. That's my opinion. Please, that's my opinion. I think it's important that you are mature enough to recognise those differences that you have of opinion.
Yep.
But at the same time, you're looking down range for the same outcome.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I like to think that I'm able to help do.
Yep.
And provide insights. I think over the years of doing army and door work and recruitment now, I've got a pretty good idea of how to read people. I sort of...
Yeah, it gives you that unique experience of, because you're seeing all walks of life with different hats on, of army, doorman, what you're doing now. You're seeing all different, and now it's very corporate. It's very different to back then where it was army knockabout guys. The average Joe Bo civilian is the doorman. So yeah, absolutely, and I think. It gives you a unique set of skills too, like a unique skill set.
Yeah, it's almost, and I think that's a good thing. I think people becoming more social. I think it's a really important thing. And I think that's one thing that's missing from a lot of young people these days. You sort of see a lot of it where they're suffering from anxiety and they're suffering from all this sort of rubbish from, experiences they've had or not had. I think these little PDA things that we've got that we carry each day are our worst enemy, in my opinion. Because we start people doing everything on social media, right? Yeah. And I think if I reflect back to people trying to get into defence now and the amount of the abilities for their case managers to track them and they're not able to, reflects on the fact that we've lost that interpersonal skill with people. And this is where I think a lot of young people are struggling, is because they're either afraid or they don't know how to engage. And I think that's a skill
100%.
we need to... Because I see it with a lot of young graduates and even young officers, all three services. They're not as social as the ones that I used to. Like a lieutenant back in my day was a really strong social... they knew how to... You looked at them and you're like, wow, this guy is on the money.
Yeah.
And in turn, I speak to a lot of younger officers today, and there is a stark difference in their abilities to engage.
Or even have a conversation like you and I are having.
Yeah.
They struggle.
It's a real and I don't know how to fix that. I think that's a society thing. I think that's something where we need to recognise that all your answers in life aren't on Google, right? Yes. Or through some idiot in an influencer or whatever you want to. I call them effluencers because they spread a lot of shit. But anyway, I think we need to learn from that a bit, and I sort of see that in a lot of young guys. I mean, you go out to the base now and you sort of look at the way the guys are set up, living conditions. I mean, they're separated from each other. They're all living with different people from different units. They all live alone in these little one-bedroom apartment type setups. I think that's ridiculous. I'd rather see them in an apartment where there's 4 bedrooms to a common room and a bathroom or whatever else, with the same guys from the same unit to get that unit cohesive. Because I think a lot of the mental issues that are happening to young people, particularly in defence now, is based on their inability to socialise. They come to work, they go home, and that's it.
Yeah, they don't integrate.
They don't integrate.
Yeah.
You know, I mean...
In your day, you didn't have that.
Well, mate, we used to have... Okay, and I mean, it's a bit draconian, like people might think, but we had 6 guys to a room, right? You could have 6, but we usually had 4.
Yeah.
We got cash in hand. We had our tables personnel, like the old steel table.
Yeah.
You used to throw your pay packet in the top, close it, and it'd be there when you come back. And if someone needed money, you'd get an IOU. I remember getting IOUs.
Yeah.
Oh, Huck, sorry, mate, I took $20. I'll pay you back on payday. Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
You know, and that was the sort of trust that you had with the people in your room.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I still talk to all these half-wits, and they are half-wits. But they're people that you
We trusted.
well, they're family for life, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You know?
And it's... Yeah, it's just... Look, it is a very... Yeah, I don't know how to... As you say, mate, I don't know how to change that going forward, but... I mean, look, we could probably talk for another 2 hours trying to work out all the problems in the world, but we'll get back to you, mate. And knowing what you know now, mate, and all that you've been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen? Great question.
Look, I suppose, you know, you probably asked that of a million different people, but I think for me, it's trust your instincts and back yourself. You know, confidence is only developed through experience, right?
Yep.
Experience is only gained by stepping out the door and getting a smack in the chops, right? And I mean that in a I mean that, I don't mean that physically, but I mean that in a sort of
the hard knocks.
the hard knocks, right?
Yeah.
Because no one's coming to save you, right?
You can do it yourself.
You got to do it yourself, right? You got to step into the ring, and if you think you can step into the ring, hey, go your hardest. But I think that's the key to it. I think back yourself, put yourself in there. You know, the only way you're going to learn is through getting that clip under the ear, so to speak.
Absolutely. No, I think it is, mate. Like, you know, you've had you've come from the school of hard knocks, like I have as well, and like that's the experience you gain, and it gives you life lessons.
Totally.
You know, and yeah, you can read it in a book, but there's nothing like being in at the coalface. You know, learning those hard knocks. That's where you grow as a person. That's, you know, you can read something in a book, but the hard knocks.
It comes down to, and people would have heard this quote before. It's being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You know, and I mean that's in its truest sense means doing something that doesn't make you feel comfortable is only going to make you better.
100%.
If you do stuff that's comfortable all the time, you're never going to leave the suburb.
No.
You know?
No, not at all. And, mate, this is a prime example of the podcast, mate. When I first started, I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. And for the first 60 episodes, mate, I cringed at how I did it. But as you go along, you learn... Okay, you learn how to get better. You every episode you listen and you go, okay, maybe I can get a little bit better there. And it is now that I've done over 100, I do feel more comfortable now.
Yeah, it's mate. It's one of those things that you know, and I applaud you for doing it, mate. I think it's really good that you've gone out and done this. I think it's capturing people's stories. It's important. You know, because
we've only got to look at both of us knew the late Nick Hill, and he's gone now, mate. And
Jesus Christ,
captured his life story, and you know, it's and that's the thing, like you say.
Pete Cafey, you know, Jesus Christ, Cafey. I've got a good story about Pete. Pete was a lance jack. We were in Cambodia.
Yep.
Right. He was in 3 Battalion. Pete never wore anything blue. He refused to wear the cap, refused to wear the brassard. He got in a lot of trouble. He'd be rolling around with his bloody maroon beret on, right? He goes, you know, oh, para, you're para or nothing, you know, this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was an incident that happened. Pete's a bit older than me. Pete, and I've got to be careful what I say here, but there was an incident that happened that was really untidy. I mean, really to its truest sense. And it was at a point where we're right at the cusp of this vote. And so as you can imagine, there's a lot of people jostling for position, right? And so there's a lot of idiots with guns doing stupid shit and putting heat on people and threatening and all the sorts of things you can imagine to try and get power, right? So at one point, just before the election, I think the son of the king decided that everything east of the Mekong River was going to be a separated country. And we were told, basically, good luck. Guys, we don't know what's going to happen from this point, but you're on your own. And at the same time, we got the local Indian section or platoon. It was close by. We said, right, boys, let's get in the same compound.
Yep.
God knows what happened to the local coppers. Coppers they just jumped in the vehicles and just took off, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, so we're stuck out in the middle of nowhere with this mob, and Pete and I, there was an incident that happened, and we found out who it was, and Pete, in his very subtle way of doing things, said, right, we're going to sort it out. And I said, what do you mean? What do you mean, Corporal? We're going to sort it out. And we did. Went down and we sorted this thing out in a very old school manner, which was quite comfortable for me.
Yep.
Which it turns out that Pete was quite comfortable with as well. But it sort of solved something that I think, had it gone further, could have been newsworthy, I think, because the people involved, different factions doing different shit, who had different ideas, who found other people threatening and were prepared to do what was necessary to make themselves or put themselves in a position of ownership. You know what I mean? So unfortunately, Pete's not with us anymore. And that was, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, unfortunately, mate, the demons got him. And it's... Mate, that's why I started the podcast, is to record all of you, like yours guys' stories, and to shed a bit of light on what our military and first responders do, and to just let people know, mate, that they're never alone, and you know it's not weak to speak. Put your hand up and actually say that you're struggling, and mate, learn from the stories of yourself and so many others that. Yeah, you're never alone. No,
and I think that's really important that recognise that, because you go through life bouncing off the walls and you think, nah, get it done, I'll be right, push forward, fix bayonets. Mm-hmm. But at some point, and it's going to be at the point where you least want it to happen, you could have taken a knee. And that's and you really can't afford to do that. So I think it's important. So if anyone even thinks about how to go about doing something, give me a yell. You can take my number, mate.
There's always someone out there to you're never alone, and that's great advice.
Happy to pick them up by the scruff of the neck, right? And wake up yourself, but I think it's important, mate. But
absolutely, and for you, mate, we mentioned it at the start of the podcast, but for you, was looking back now, was joining the army still the best decision you made?
Oh, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. It was something that I think me in particular, and I think my parents were glad too, because the structure. I had people who could meet me at my level, sort of pull me back and say, well, mate, you're not who you think you are, champion. Yep. And that was made very clear to me week one of Kapooka. Right. I remember, actually, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was to sign me up on the day. I remember him saying, as soon as we did the oath and we signed the contract, he went, right, you are now mine. Kiss your mummies and daddies, get on the bus. And at that moment, I was like, oh, he's not the nice cuddly guy. Anyway.
No, and mate, I want to highlight because in 2021, you along with some great mates of yours,
Yes.
started a whiskey company and called Wet Canteen Brewing Company, and you have become one of my sponsors.
Yes.
And mate, talk us through how this started.
Look, Wet Canteen, it was interesting. Brian, Greg and Trent, they were a little bit ahead of me when I sort of got introduced to it. But I mean, those guys are well versed on whiskey, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a bit of a lay person. I like the taste. The taste, I'll do that. You know, so I think the team, we sort of sat down and we talked about looking at, when you go to a whiskey bar and you look at the whiskeys, you're like, wow, look at all these crazy labels, and you can't tell one from the other. From mine, these guys can. For me, I just go, oh, wow, this is amazing. But then as we've matured through it, we've started to understand who's who in the zoo when it comes to whiskey. And not necessarily the most expensive whiskey is the best one, I'll say that. But what we thought about was coming up with a way where we could use something as a bit of a differentiator from getting a coin or a plaque, or, you know, in some cases, you know, you get a unit flag that's in a you know, which can be, you know, quite expensive in itself. But we thought we'd just come up with something where a unit might like, or a squadron or even ship might like a whiskey with their unit's emblem. Mm-hmm. Right, to sort of make it a bit more personable. So at the end of the year, when someone gets posted out, or if someone's done something great or whatever, hey, thanks you done a great job. Please have a bottle. And it sort of went it got a little bit bigger than that, because then we started having companies saying, hey, can you guys do something for us? And, you know, we had companies like Kepler's come in, you know, we've done a label for a couple of different companies on the website. We do one for 5-7 for their association get together. Yep. For their 30 years, I think 30 or 40 years, which was great. So, you know, it's really sort of started to sort of take shape now, where we've got return customers. It's been really, really good. But I'd have to thank Nick McKenzie from The Age for making that phone call that time and cast some accusations around, which really did help us and put us on the map. So thank Nick if you're listening. That was that sort of sparked a lot of people's interest, you know, rightly or wrongly. You know, we last year we gave $20,000 to charity from the whiskies that we've done for different charities, which has been fantastic. Yep. You know, I suppose for us, it's the commencement of something that we're going to grow a little bigger. We're introducing, you know, vodkas and some rums in, which is great, because not everyone's a whiskey drinker, and not everyone's so we want to give people a little bit of variety. But again, it all comes down to we want to make sure it's personable. You know, we design the labels, we do a lot of creation ourselves. We sit and we spitball ideas together. You notice our new hat.
Yes. Yep.
That's our new one that's come in. You know, so we're doing things. Even we're trying to find out where guys have got photographs of their old boozers and the emblems, and we're actually making T-shirts with the old boozer emblems. Yeah, awesome. You know what I mean? It's actually quite it's been a real trip, Adam. It's been something where we've enjoyed it. But again, we've got to make sure it's cost effective. Okay. So, you know, if you think of it at the moment, the Australian government isn't exactly helping producers at all. I mean, distillers right now, for 100 litres of spirit, for a litre of spirit, have to pay $100 in tax. Are you kidding me? So, you know, and then that knock-on effect is through the labelling, it's through the boxing, it's through everything. And so all of a sudden, like I was up there the other day at the Full Moon here in Sandgate, a pint of Bolter XPA was $17.50 for a pint.
Jesus.
Come on. You know what I mean?
Well, gone are the days, mate, of the $4 schooner.
$4. Jeez. You know, so I think, you know, for us, we want to make sure that we've got a really good product that people will enjoy. And again, coming back to what I said earlier, it's sitting down. We're not promoting alcohol as a measure, and I should be one to talk about that, as a measure to deal with. But it's always good to sit down with a mate and, you know, pull out something a bit random and have a whiskey, you know, or a rum or a vodka or whatever we're going to get together. But we're trying to start conversations. You know, it's coming back to having that conversation, right?
Yep.
And I think that's the problem because, you know, if you think about guys who get given full TPI when they get, I won't say kicked out, but when they're discharged and they go home and basically you get full TPI, you cannot do any more than 8 hours a week before they say, hey, your TPI's gone. So they're sitting at home, right, by themselves, right? You know what's going to happen. It happened to a mate of ours, Chris Rogers. So Ruggers is over in WA. He's on full TPI, PTSD, necks himself.
Yep.
Has a drug overdose out the front of a gym in Perth. And what do you do? You know? So I think it's really important that we start these conversations. If that's our bit to try and generate a bit of, hey man, come around, what are you doing? Oh, let's have a chat. And then sit down and have that conversation. And this is an ability for people to sort of open up a bit more than hey, I'll put my hat on that.
And mate, that's why I love the concept, and that's why I got you involved with the podcast. And I love having you guys as part of the podcast, and because I believe in what you are doing, and it's great to have the support from you guys. And like you say, mate, it's like one of my other sponsors. He's the same thing, permanent TPI, and from his service. And he wanted to do something. Yeah. And all his profit goes to charities. So first responder and veteran charities. Awesome. So, and it's great to align with all of you guys because I believe in what you're doing in the space. And, you know, it's great to have your support. And, mate, I'm excited to see where it's going to go. It's going to be awesome. Yeah,
look, it's slowly growing. I mean, obviously, you know, there's a lot of work in marketing. Good grief.
Oh, God, yeah. I've just written a book. I know what that's about to come.
Marketing, man. What's going on with that?
Yeah.
I thought, we'll just put it on, you know, social media and they will come. Well, no, you've got to be constant, you know. And then this Zuckerberg, whatever his name is, he's a savvy cat, right? He knows how to play the game when it comes to this sort of thing. So those ones and zeros actually mean something.
Yes.
So every time you click, so click if you see our website, if you see anything, click on it, please. It just gets us more out there. But it's, you know, as I said, we just want to offer up something that's a little bit different that people enjoy. You know, it's all about socialising more, you know. And as I said before, a lot of the guys today really struggle through that social interaction piece. And I think you cannot be a soldier, sailor or airman, right? You cannot be a soldier, sailor or airman without being social. You have to be in the game.
100%.
And the beauty about defence is we take every bugger from every walk of life.
Yep.
Right? Every bugger. We'll give you a run, right? And that's a good thing. I remember I'm on the bus going down to Kapooga, right? Looked around and you had guys with dreadlocks and guys that looked like they just climbed out of bed. You know, you got all walks of life, guys who have got, you know, masters in mathematics and all this sort of stuff. You've got really intelligent people, and you've got, you know, dummies like me. By the time we got down there and we had the head shave and we put on the uniform, we're all the same.
Yep.
Every one of us. And I think the beauty of defence in particular is that we all start at the baseline, right? Yep. And, you know, some of the best guys I've ever met all, you know, come from these zany backgrounds. There's a guy, Pete Buzzicott. Pete was in the Army. Pete's he is the world... I'm going to get this right. So, you know the bends, like diving? You get the bends?
Yeah.
He is the guy that knows how to solve people that get the bends. And he used to be in 107 up in Townsville.
Yeah, right.
Pete Buzzicott. Some guys remember Pete. Pete, brain as big as Texas.
Yep.
Smartest guy. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing here? I think he was doing a PhD in mathematics before he kicked into touch. Joined the Army as a digger. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Mate, crazy different walks of life. And I say it to all the listeners out there, go to Wet Canteen Bottling Co. and get some amazing whiskey. It is. I can absolutely attest that it is a fantastic drop. So, guys, get out there and support the guys because they're doing amazing work. And yeah, just head over to the website and make a purchase. So, mate, before we finish, what are your plans going forward with your family and into the future?
Jeez, I've got to pay this mortgage off. That's the first thing. Yeah, look, I think that's a good question, Adam. I mean, I haven't been thrown that curveball before. If I think of what Mum asked me, well, what's your plans? Look, you know, I really want to stay committed to what I'm doing at the moment. You know, I really think that we're doing good work in defence right now. There's a lot of really, really good companies out there delivering some fantastic capabilities that I think the government need to just recognise that they are doing some very good work. We've got a mountain of people in uniform at the moment that have joined for a reason, like we did, like I did, that need that confidence that they're going to be able to do what's necessary if the balloon goes up. And for us at Wet Canteen, I think we really want to make sure that, you know, we're delivering as well as what we can. We're working with this great little Australian companies. We're offering up something that's completely different to a lot of what other businesses do, and we're supporting Australian manufacturing. That's what I'm about.
Awesome, great, mate. It's good to hear that there are great people like yourself and many others that are, you know, still wanting to give back to this great country because it is a great country.
Absolutely.
And for you, mate, what advice would you give to anyone who is thinking about joining the military, and what advice could you give to them after serving for 23 years?
Keep at it. The problem with defence recruitment at the moment is they've got a civilian recruiter in there who gives $30 an hour worth of a fuck. Right? That's a problem because they're never trained up. They don't understand what their job is. So it's up to you to make sure you keep driving them to get to where you want to be. Don't lose heart. Keep ringing them. Keep annoying them. Keep going at it. Because once you get in, it'll be worth it. Now, as I said earlier, once you do join, plan to get out. That's a really important part because you just don't know what's going to happen down the track. But by the time you get to, you know, the ripe old age of what I am, it's important to have a bit of an idea about where you'd like to see yourself. You know, just because you might have joined Grunts or, you know, you might have joined Arty or somewhere, you've got a lot of skills and experience that are reflective of what's needed in the commercial space. I understand that over in, I think, the United States, they're getting rid of the fact that people need a degree. And they're going for people who've got experience, which I think that's incredibly important because dealing with humans, as I said earlier, social interaction with people and being able to read people, read the room, understand where they're coming from and having empathy to what, as I said, I'm not an empathy person, but I've had to learn this skill. It's really important for a leader, particularly for a business in the commercial space, because people yearn for good leadership. There is no such thing as a bad company, right? That's a fallacy. It's poor leadership, 100%. Poor leaders who can't deliver is where it falls down. So every complaint I ever get from someone who's leaving a business or changing careers is because of the way they've been led. And leadership, it's you've got to learn that stuff and know how people tick so you can get the best out of them. That would be my opinion.
Absolutely. Great advice, mate. Leadership here starts and finishes with a leader.
100%.
And great advice, mate. Well, Mark, you have served your country with honour and brought pride to your family. Thank you for all you do for veterans and first responders and also people who are struggling with mental health. It has been an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on True Blue Conversations and share your story. Thank you, Mark Henneberry.
Thanks, mate.
Raise your glasses, podcasters. This episode of True Blue Conversations is brought to you by Wet Canteen Bottling Company, the perfect way to commemorate and celebrate life's most special occasions. Elevate your moments, savour the taste, and make them truly unforgettable with Wet Canteen. Head on over to wetcanteenbottlingco.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Now, on with the show. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Blum. See you on the front line.